The Weight of What I Built. A Hood Eloquence presentation. Where the streets meet the literature. You can build something beautiful for the world and still come home to empty hands. The bravest thing a man who knows only giving can do is learn to want something for himself. Anonymous. She didn't walk into his life. She walked into his office. And that was his undoing. Hood Eloquence. Part 1. The Man Before the Meeting. Every empire starts with a man who simply refused to quit. MARSHAWN BRENTLY, Private Journal. Chapter 1. What he carried before he had a name for it. MARSHAWN BRENTLY had been holding things up since he was 9 years old. That was the year his father, Gerald Brently, a man who smelled of motor oil and ambition in equal parts, disappeared from the family's house on Delmar Avenue with $300 and a woman named Cheris from the next block over. MARSHAWN's mother, Loretta, had not broken. She had bent, slowly, like a green branch under wet snow, and she had leaned toward her oldest son with a weight she never once acknowledged she was placing. He remembered being in the 4th grade and knowing exactly how much the light bill cost. He remembered being in the 6th grade and lying awake calculating whether there was enough in the household jar, the one behind the flour canister, to cover his youngest sister Tamara's school supplies. He did not remember, not once, anyone asking him how he was doing. Not as a real question. Not the kind that waited for an answer. He had not resented it then. Children rarely do. But he was 34 years old now, and on a Tuesday morning in the middle of October, sitting in the cab of his F-250 outside the downtown permit office, he finally said out loud what he had been circling for years. "I am so goddamn tired." He said it quietly, the way a man says something he has been ashamed of wanting to say. The truck's engine was running. The heat was on. His phone had 14 unread texts, 9 from his mother, 3 from his sister Devon, 1 from his cousin Prentice asking to borrow his trailer, and 1 from a number he didn't recognize that turned out to be an ad for gutters. He put the phone face down on the passenger seat and looked at the permit office door. Brently Construction LLC had just been awarded the Meridian Commons project, a $7 million downtown mixed-use development that would take 18 months to complete and require a crew of 42. It was the largest contract he had ever won. The culmination of 11 years of showing up before sunrise, doing work other contractors glossed over, and building a reputation in the city one poured foundation at a time. He should have been celebrating. Instead, he was sitting in his truck wondering if he had enough of himself left to give to something that was finally, actually, his. His mother called as he was walking into the permit office. He let it ring. Then he felt the familiar guilt, her voice in his memory, the particular pitch she reserved for injury, and he answered. "MARSHAWN, I need you to come by. The furnace is making that sound again. I have a permit appointment in 5 minutes, Ma." "Well, this is your mama's house that you grew up in." He stood on the sidewalk. A woman in a wool coat moved around him without looking up from her phone. The city moved the way it always did, indifferent, mechanical, relentless. "I'll call Hicks Heating and Air. I'll pay for it. But I cannot come today." The silence that followed was a specific kind of silence. It had texture. It was the silence his mother used the way other people used words, deploying it for maximum effect, letting it sit between them until he felt the discomfort of it in his sternum. "Fine," she said finally. Then, "Your sister said you didn't come to Devon's thing on Saturday. I had to drive to Austin for a materials meeting. Family comes first, MARSHAWN." He did not say what rose in his chest. He said, "I'll call Hicks today. Love you." He hung up. He stood there another 3 seconds. Then he went inside and did his job. Chapter 2. The ad he wrote at midnight. The office was on the 2nd floor of a building on Commerce Street, not downtown proper, but close enough that the address sounded good on the phone. MARSHAWN had leased it 2 years ago, moving out of the shared workspace he'd been using since the beginning. The space had good bones. High ceilings, exposed brick on the eastern wall, south-facing windows that filled the room with morning light. He had put a desk in it, a filing cabinet, a conference table with 4 mismatched chairs, and a corkboard on the wall where he pinned project timelines. It had never occurred to him to make it look like anything other than what it was. Functional space where a working man kept his working things. The Meridian Commons contract required him to hire. He had subcontractors, site supervisors, crew leads, the construction side was covered. But the office was another problem. The contract brought with it a volume of correspondence, compliance paperwork, project coordination, and public-facing representation that he simply could not manage alongside field oversight. He had been doing both for 2 years. He had been doing everything for 2 years. He wrote the job posting at 12:47 a.m., sitting at his kitchen table in the house he had bought 3 years ago. A 4-bedroom craftsman in the kind of neighborhood people moved to when they were planning for a life that MARSHAWN had not yet had the time to plan. The house had a guest room that no one had ever used. The 3rd bedroom held equipment he had not found space for in the office. The master bedroom had a window seat he had never sat in. He typed the ad with his reading glasses on, the cursor blinking in the field. Administrative assistant. Brently Construction LLC. Full-time position. Downtown office. Seeking organized, professional, detail-oriented individual to support owner-operated construction firm during major downtown development contract. Experience in office administration, communications, or related field preferred. This role requires someone who can manage independently, represent the company professionally, and grow with us. Competitive salary. Benefits negotiable. He read it back. Then he added one line that he almost deleted 3 times before he left it. This company is going somewhere. We need someone who wants to go with it. He posted it at 1:02 a.m. and went to bed. He lay awake for 40 minutes thinking about the contract, the crew, the furnace his mother wanted fixed, and the guest room nobody used. Then he slept. He did not think about who would answer the ad. He was not a man who spent much time thinking about what was coming toward him. He had spent his whole life looking at what was right in front of him. The thing that needed to be done, the weight that needed lifting, the gap that needed filling. It would not occur to him until much later that this was exactly the wrong posture for receiving something good. Part 2. The woman who came ready. She had been preparing for a moment she didn't even know was waiting for her. Hood eloquence. Chapter 3. Janice Lee, freshly minted. Janice Lee had graduated on a Saturday in May, walked across the stage in 4-inch heels that she had practiced walking in for 3 weeks, shook the dean's hand, and cried in the parking lot for 15 minutes afterward. Not from sadness but from the sheer physics of it, the relief of something enormous completing itself. She was 23 years old. She had a communications degree from a historically black college that had taught her not just the mechanics of the field but the spirit of it. The understanding that words were not neutral, that a message was a living thing, that representation in every room and on every screen was a form of power that could be wielded with precision or squandered with carelessness. Her mother, Paula Lee, had driven 4 hours to sit in that gymnasium and watch her daughter walk. Her grandmother, who everyone called Miss Jackie, had brought a cowbell. This had caused a minor incident. Miss Jackie was entirely unapologetic about it. The months after graduation had been humbling in the specific way that the gap between preparation and opportunity always is. She had applied to 43 positions. She had received 11 responses. She had been to 6 interviews and gotten 0 offers, not because she was unqualified but because she was overqualified for the entry-level roles that didn't pay enough and undercredentialed by industry experience for the ones that did. She had been living with her Aunt Rachel in the city for 3 months, paying a reduced rent, working a coffee shop job she did not put on her LinkedIn, and applying to everything that crossed her screen. The Brently construction posting crossed her screen at 7:14 on a Wednesday morning. She almost kept scrolling. Construction. She thought of hard hats and blueprints. She thought of the gap between what she knew how to do and what a construction company might need. She thought about the commute, the industry, whether there was room for a communications degree in a world that built things with its hands. Then she read the last line of the posting. This company is going somewhere. We need someone who wants to go with it. Janice Lee had spent the last 3 months being told, in various polite ways, that she was not what companies were looking for. She had not stopped believing that what she brought to a room had value. But she had started to wonder, in the small hours, if she was going to have to wait a very long time before someone else believed it too. That line. That one line. It read like an invitation rather than a screening mechanism. It sounded like someone who was not trying to protect what they had but was trying to build what they wanted. She sat up in her aunt's guest room, opened her laptop, and spent 2.5 hours crafting a cover letter that was, without question, the finest piece of writing she had produced since her senior thesis. Chapter 4. The interview. She wore the navy blazer. She had 3 interview outfits and she had laid all of them on the bed and stood there for 10 minutes before she put the navy blazer back in the closet and pulled out the burnt orange suit jacket she had bought on sale and not yet worn anywhere. Felt like the right call. Felt like herself. The building on Commerce Street was not what she had expected. She had expected a ground floor office with a logo on the glass door and a receptionist already in place. Instead there was an elevator, a second floor, and a door with a small placard that read simply, Brently Construction LLC. She knocked. She heard footsteps. Heavy, unhurried. And then the door opened, and MARSHAWN Brently was standing there. She had not prepared herself for what he looked like, which she later understood was an omission in her preparation. He was tall in the way that filled a doorframe without effort. He was dark-skinned with a neatly shaped beard and the kind of hands that told you immediately he did actual work. Not the desk-calloused hands of a man who typed all day but the built, capable hands of someone who knew what it meant to make something. He was wearing dark trousers and a crisp white Henley, no tie, which she read correctly as a man who respected the meeting without being precious about it. He looked at her with an expression she could not immediately categorize. It was not dismissal. It was not obvious interest. It was assessment, the way a person looks at something they are trying to understand before they decide what to do with it. Ms. Lee. Mr. Brently. He stepped back and she walked in. The office was functional. That was the word that arrived immediately. Not a criticism, just an observation. Everything in it served a purpose. The corkboard on the wall held a project timeline that she could tell even from a distance was detailed and methodically organized. The filing cabinet was labeled. The conference table was clean. The 4 mismatched chairs were arranged in a way that suggested they had been pulled from different places and had not yet found a permanent configuration. It was not a space that had been thought about. It was a space that had been used. She sat across from him and put her portfolio on the table between them. "Your cover letter was good," he said. "Not, it was impressive. Or, I enjoyed reading it. Just, it was good." She liked this immediately. She said, "Thank you. I wrote it because I meant it, not to fill space." Something moved across his expression. Not quite a smile. An acknowledgement. "Tell me what you actually know how to do," he said. "Not what you studied. What you can actually do." She had prepared for this. She opened the portfolio. "I can manage your digital presence and make it work for you. I can write and edit professional correspondence, proposals, and reports. I can organize and run your calendar, your client communications, and your permit and compliance paperwork if someone teaches me the specifics. I can design materials, not graphic design degree level, but professional and clean. I built a content strategy for a nonprofit during my senior year that increased their grant applications by 30%. I can represent you in rooms where your attention needs to be elsewhere." She paused. "And I work hard. Not the kind of hard that means I do what I'm told and nothing else. The kind of hard that means I see a problem before you tell me it's a problem." MARSHAWN BRENTLY leaned back in his chair. He looked at her for a long moment. "The position pays $52,000 to start. Benefits kick in at 90 days. I need someone who can start in 2 weeks. Janice kept her expression even. 52,000 was not what she had hoped for. It was more than she had been making at the coffee shop, which was a different kind of number. "I can start in 2 weeks, she said. He extended his hand across the table. She shook it. His grip was firm without being demonstrative, the handshake of someone who had learned early that you didn't need to crush a hand to make a point. She noticed that his palm was warm. She filed this information in a compartment she didn't examine and said, "I look forward to it." He walked her to the door. She took the elevator down. She got to her car, sat in the driver's seat, and pressed both hands flat on her thighs. Then she called her mother. "I got it," she said, and her mother made the sound that only mothers make. Not just joy but vindication. The relief of watching something you always believed in finally be seen. Part 3. The architecture of proximity. You don't fall all at once. You fall slowly, the way a building settles, a fraction of an inch at a time, until one morning you look up and realize you've moved. Hood Eloquence. Chapter 5. The first month. She came in her first week and did not ask him to explain things twice. This was the first thing he noticed. He had been operating alone long enough that he had developed a particular efficiency in his explanations. Concise, dense, with the assumption baked in that the person receiving the information would need to ask follow-up questions, and that those questions would cost him time he did not have. With Janice, he would explain a process once, the permit tracking system, the client communication protocol, the way he preferred invoices filed, and when he came back to it 2 days later, it was not just done but improved. She had built a shared folder structure that made the permit system searchable. She had created a template for client communications that was more professional than the one he'd been using. She had organized the invoices by project and year and made a note on a sticky on his monitor that said simply, "Found 3 that were never sent. Sent them. You're owed $14,200. He stood at his desk and read that sticky note for a long moment. Then he went to her desk, which she had reorganized within 48 hours of her arrival, adding a small succulent and a notepad with a clean geometric cover and a charging station for her laptop and phone, and said, "How did you find those?" She looked up from her monitor. "I went through the project files when I was building the folder system. The invoices were there, but they didn't have any corresponding payment records. So I checked against the contracts. They'd just been missed." He looked at her. "Good work," he said. She nodded, already looking back at her screen. He went back to his desk. He sat down. He thought about the word, good, and whether it was sufficient and whether, "Thank you," would have been more accurate, and then he went back to his work and did not say anything else about it. He would learn, over the following weeks, that this was a recurring problem he had with her. Not finding the words exactly, but finding them too late, after the moment had already closed. The office changed. He noticed it the way you notice a room has gotten lighter. Not in the moment of change but in the aftermath, when you look up and realize the quality of the air is different. She had not redesigned anything dramatically. She had, over the course of 3 weeks, replaced the fluorescent bulb in the lamp near the conference table with a warmer-toned one. She had brought in 2 prints, unframed, pinned with a precision that made them look intentional, that were abstract and modern and happened to echo the brick color of the wall. She had put a plant in the corner that she watered every Monday. She had replaced the mismatched conference chairs with 4 that matched, sourced from a second-hand office furniture place across town that she had found and arranged and handled without telling him until they arrived, and he said, Where did these come from? I found them. Cost $240. I put it on the company card. I can send you the receipt if you want to review it. No, he said. They look good, she said. They look like a company. He didn't respond to that, but he thought about it for 2 days. They look like a company, not, they look nice, or, they were a good deal. She had a way of framing things that made him see what he had built differently. Not bigger than it was. She wasn't a flatterer, and he had good enough instincts to distrust flattery, but more completely than he had been seeing it on his own. Chapter 6. The campaign. The idea for the advertisement campaign came from a conversation they were having about something else entirely. It was a Thursday afternoon in month 2. They were going over the subcontractor schedule for the Meridian Commons groundbreaking, and she had pulled up the company's website to check something, and when the page loaded she looked at it for a long moment without saying anything. He was watching her. What? He said. This website, she said carefully, not cruelly, carefully. What about it? It doesn't look like a $7 million company. He was quiet. I built it myself in 2019, he said. I know. Another silence. Then, can I fix it? He looked at her. She was looking at the screen with the focused expression she got when she was already 3 steps into something. How much will it cost? Let me do some of it myself first and show you what I'm thinking before we talk about cost. He said yes. He had already learned that when she asked for the latitude, the result was worth giving it. What she built over the following 6 weeks was not just a website. It was a story. She interviewed him 3 separate sit-down conversations during lunch breaks, asking him questions he had not been asked before, about where the company came from, what it was building toward, what it believed in. She photographed the Meridian Commons site during different phases. She found and organized old project photographs that had been sitting in a phone backup he had forgotten. She wrote copy that described Brently construction in language that was precise and human and that made something he had been living inside for 11 years feel, when he read it, like something worth being proud of. Then she launched a social media campaign targeted at government and municipal procurement officers. Then Brently Construction received a call from the State Infrastructure Division. He was on site when she texted him. He read the message twice. He read it a 3rd time. Then he called her. Tell me exactly what they said, he said. He was standing at the edge of a foundation trench. The city spread out behind him in the autumn light. They said they found the company through the campaign. They want to discuss a public infrastructure contract. Maintenance and new construction on 6 bridge access roads in the county. They want a meeting Thursday. He was quiet for long enough that she said, MARSHAWN. It was the first time she had used his first name. They had been operating on last names, Mr. Brently, Ms. Lee, with a formality that neither of them had discussed or agreed to but that had established itself naturally, the way professional boundaries often do. He noticed the name. He filed it in that same compartment he didn't examine. I'm here, he said. Thursday works. Clear my morning. Already done, she said. He almost said, what would I do without you? But he stopped himself before it arrived in the air, because the answer frightened him slightly, and because he had gotten into the habit of monitoring the things he said to her for anything that might sound like more than it was supposed to be. Part 4. Business trips and the space between words. The road is where you find out who you are when nobody's watching. Except somebody is always watching, especially when you wish they weren't. Hood Eloquence. Chapter 7. Austin, the first trip. The state infrastructure contract required a pre-qualification site visit to 3 of the 6 locations. 2 were in the metro area, 1 was in Austin. The Austin visit required an overnight. MARSHAWN had gone on business trips alone for 11 years. He had eaten hotel-restaurant dinners with his phone propped against the water glass. He had had phone calls with his mother from parking lots and debriefed with himself on the drive home because there was no one to debrief with. Janice came because the pre-qualification required a formal presentation of company credentials, and she had built the credential package and knew its contents better than he did. They drove. It was a 4-hour drive. He drove. She navigated, which he had not asked her to do but which she did because she was constitutionally incapable of being a passive presence in a moving vehicle. The first hour was professional. They went over the presentation, the specifications, the questions they anticipated. The second hour was quieter. He drove the way he did everything. Focused, unhurried, with his hands at 10 and 2 and his eyes covering the full road. Somewhere in the middle of the 3rd hour she asked, how did you get into construction? He glanced at her. She was looking at the road ahead of them. The question had landed simply, without agenda. My grandfather, he said. Tell me, he told her. About William Brently, who had built the house MARSHAWN grew up in with his own hands, who had a tool belt that smelled like iron and wood resin, who had told MARSHAWN at age 7 that a man who could build something could never truly be powerless. About how MARSHAWN had watched the house fall into disrepair after his father left and his grandfather aged and how that had felt like a failure of something larger than just a structure. About how he had started working construction jobs at 18 not because he had a plan but because his hands needed to be doing something real, and about how over time the plan had grown around the work the way a tree grows around an old fence post. She listened without interrupting. This was unusual. Most people he had found listened until they found an entry point for themselves. She just listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He sounds like he was something. He was everything," he said. And the plainness of it surprised him, the way it came out without the armoring he usually applied to things that mattered. She looked out the window. The Texas landscape moved past them in the late afternoon light. "My grandmother was like that for me," she said. "Miss Jackie, the cowbell grandmother?" She turned to look at him sharply. He kept his eyes on the road, but she saw the corner of his mouth move. "You read my application materials very carefully," she said. "You mentioned the cowbell incident in your cover letter. In the context of talking about people who showed up fully." She stared at him. Then she laughed. Not the professional laugh she used in meetings, the one that was warm but measured, but the actual one, the one that took up space. He did not let himself look at her. He looked at the road. But he was smiling. The hotel had 2 rooms booked. He had booked them. They were on the same floor, 3 doors apart. The meeting went well. Better than well, the site director, a man named Dean Harrison, had done his research on the campaign and specifically referenced the company's track record on downtown projects. Janice ran the credential presentation without notes and answered 3 questions he had not anticipated with information she had researched independently. Afterward, Harrison shook both their hands and said, "That's a good team you have," addressing MARSHAWN but looking at both of them. MARSHAWN said, "Yes, it is." And he meant it without qualification. They had dinner at a restaurant that was not the hotel restaurant. She had found it. A small, dark, genuinely good Southern food place 3 blocks from the hotel. They sat across from each other at a 2-top by the window, and the conversation moved from the meeting to the drive to the city to things neither of them had planned to talk about. She told him about the 43 applications. Not to complain, she framed it simply as information, as context, but he received it as something else. He received it as evidence of a kind of perseverance he recognized, the kind that does not announce itself but simply continues. "They missed out," he said. She looked at him across the table. The restaurant was warm and low-lit, and outside the Austin streets were moving with their own rhythm. "You don't know that," she said. "Yes, I do," he said, directly, without elaboration. She held his gaze for a moment that was a half-second longer than professional. Then she looked down at her plate. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. He looked out the window. He picked up his fork. Neither of them said anything about the moment. Neither of them could have named it exactly. But it had happened, and they both knew it had happened, and they carried it separately back to their rooms 3 doors apart. Chapter 8. Nashville, San Antonio, Memphis, New Orleans, the long middle. The infrastructure contract required 4 additional trips over the next 3 months. Nashville for a contractor certification conference. San Antonio for a materials negotiation. Memphis for a site review. New Orleans for a government procurement summit that Janice had learned about through a contact she had made at the Austin meeting and had insisted they attend. MARSHAWN had not, before Janice, attended industry conferences. He had not seen the value in them. He had been too busy building to stop and be seen building. She reframed this for him without making it an argument. "The contract you have is big," she said, sitting across from him in the office over a lunch of food she had brought in. She did this twice a week, rotating between 3 places she had found within walking distance, because she had noticed he skipped lunch when left to his own devices. "But the contract you want after this one? That room is where you find it." He went to Nashville. He came back with 2 contacts he would maintain for years. He went to San Antonio, and the materials negotiation saved the company $11,000 because she had done the comparative analysis before they arrived, and he walked into the room knowing exactly how much he would pay and for what. By Memphis, they had developed a rhythm. She handled the logistics. He handled the technical meetings. She attended every meeting where the company's image was a factor. He attended every meeting where the work itself was being evaluated. Together they attended everything where both mattered, which was most of them. The people they met understood them to be a unit. They moved like a unit. They communicated in the meeting room with the shorthand that develops only between people who have logged real hours together. A glance that meant, "I need you to take this question." A small nod that meant, "I'll be right back. Keep going." A pause that meant, "Wait before you answer that." They were good at it. They were genuinely, notably good at it. The problem with being good at something together is that it begins to feel natural. The problem with natural is that it is very difficult to maintain the fiction that it is purely professional. New Orleans was the 5th trip. For months into her employment, the government procurement summit was 3 days, and this time he had booked the hotel before she could. She had been in the habit of handling the logistics, but he had reached the hotel booking page before she did and pressed confirm without examining too carefully why he had moved faster than usual. He had not booked rooms on the same floor by accident. He had not booked rooms on the same floor at all. He had booked, without thinking about it consciously, rooms that were not adjacent. They were on different floors. She did not remark on this. He did not explain it. The summit was good. Better than good. 2 contacts from the infrastructure division attended, and the dynamic that had solidified between Marshawn and Janice by this point, professional, capable, undeniably effective, read to every person in that room as exactly the kind of partnership that builds companies. A procurement officer from the State Division, a woman named Ms. Davis, told Janice over coffee on the second morning, "Your company communicates better than any contractor I've worked with in 15 years. Usually they send someone who can't talk, or they send someone who can talk but doesn't know what they're talking about. You two are the first team that does both." Janice thanked her and did not say what she thought, which was, "We're not a team. We're an employer and an employee who are doing their jobs very well." She did not say it, because she was not sure anymore that it was entirely accurate. The last night in New Orleans. The summit was over. They did not have to be anywhere. The city was outside and it was New Orleans and it was a Friday night in November and the air smelled like rain and something frying somewhere in music. She knocked on his door at 8 o'clock. He opened it. He had changed out of his meeting clothes into dark jeans and a fitted long-sleeved shirt. She had changed into a dress. Not a going-out dress, but a, why not, dress, the dark green one she had packed on impulse and then second-guessed and then left in the bag. He looked at her. She looked at him. "Come on," she said. "I'm not spending my last night in New Orleans in a hotel room." They walked for 2 hours. They ate beignets standing at a counter with powdered sugar on both their hands. They stood on a corner while a second-line brass band moved past them through the street, the whole neighborhood opening up around the music like a flower turning toward light, and she grabbed his arm without thinking, and he did not move away. She held his forearm and they watched the parade and neither of them moved for the full length of it, and then it was gone and the street was just the street again and she became aware that she was holding his arm and she let go and said, "Sorry." Quietly, he said, "Don't be." They walked back to the hotel mostly in silence. At the elevator bank she pressed her floor and he pressed his. Different floors. The elevator came. She stepped in. She turned around. He was standing outside the elevator with his hand on the door frame, holding it open. He looked at her with an expression that had nothing professional in it at all. Then he took his hand off the door frame and stepped in beside her. The elevator doors closed. He did not touch her. She did not touch him. They stood 18 inches apart and looked at the doors. His floor came first. He got off. "Good night, Janice," he said. "Good night," she said. The doors closed. She rode up alone. She sat on the edge of the hotel bed and pressed her hands on her thighs, the same gesture she had made in the car the day he hired her, the gesture that meant, "Something just happened and I need to be still inside it for a moment before I decide what to do." This time it was different. This time she knew exactly what had happened. She just didn't know what to do with it. Part 5. What families do. Blood is thick, but it will drown you just as fast as water if you let enough of it fill the room. Hood eloquence. Chapter 9. The phone calls he didn't tell her about. His mother called him twice a week without variation. His sister Devon called whenever she needed something, which averaged to 3 times a week. His cousin Prentice called once a month to borrow something. His Aunt Jo, his father's sister who had stayed in the family's life unlike his father, called every Sunday evening and was the only call he answered with full attention, because she was the only one who called without wanting anything from him. The calls he did not tell Janice about. The one in week 3 of her employment, when his mother said, "Who is this girl you hired? Devon says she looks like trouble." "Devon has never met her," he said. "Devon drove past your office and saw her through the window." He set down the pen he was holding. "My office is on the 2nd floor, Ma." A pause. "The point is you should be careful. You're building something now. You don't need distractions." The one in month 2 when Devon called directly and said, in a voice designed to sound casual, "Is she cute?" "Your assistant." "She's my employee," he said. "That's not what I asked. It's the only answer I have." The one after the Austin trip, when his mother called and said, "You were gone overnight with her?" "I was overnight for work. She was there for work." "Marshawn, I raised you to be careful about. You raised me to be responsible. That's what I'm being." The one that bothered him most. After the New Orleans trip, when his mother sat him down at her kitchen table. She had called him over under the pretext of needing help moving a box, and the box was a shoebox, already in its final location, and said, "That money you're spending on all this, the trips, the office, the new chairs or whatever, you know your sister is behind on her car payment." He looked at his mother across the table. She had a cup of tea. The kitchen was the kitchen he had grown up in. The linoleum was the same. The curtains had been replaced once 20 years ago, and not since. "Devon works," he said. "She's having a hard time. She is always having a hard time, Ma. I've been covering her hard times for 12 years. This conversation is not." He stopped. He looked at the table. This is not about Devon's car payment, he said more quietly. What is this actually about? His mother looked at her tea. I just think you should be careful, she said. About where you're putting your energy and your money. That's all. He understood, with a clarity that settled in his chest like weight, that she was not worried about his energy. She was worried about a different allocation. She was worried about what it would mean if he directed his time and resources toward someone that had nothing to do with this family. He had been covering them for so long that the idea of him being covered by something else read to them as a kind of theft. He drove home. He sat in his truck in the driveway for a while. Then he went inside and sat at his kitchen table with the lights off for 10 minutes before he turned them on. Chapter 10. Devon comes to the office. Devon Brently was 3 years younger than MARSHAWN and had, in their mother's accounting, always been the more difficult child, which meant she was the one who had expressed, at various volumes, what both of them were feeling. MARSHAWN had learned to be still with his feelings. Devon had never learned this and had never tried to. She showed up at the Commerce Street office on a Wednesday afternoon in December, unannounced, wearing a coat that was not warm enough for the weather and an expression that she had prepared before she arrived. Janice was at the front desk. She had arranged the space so that her desk functioned as a reception area when needed, which was most of the time. When Devon opened the door, they looked at each other. Hi, Janice said. Can I help you? Devon looked at her for a moment that was slightly longer than polite. I'm MARSHAWN's sister, Devon. Of course, Janice said, standing. He's on a call right now. Can I let him know you're here? Can I get you some water? Devon looked at the office. She looked at the matching chairs. She looked at the prints on the wall. She looked at the plant. She looked at the clean, organized, not how it used to be quality of the space, and something moved across her face that was complicated. No, she said. I just need to see him. Janice picked up her desk phone and buzzed MARSHAWN. Your sister is here, she said. Simple. Neutral. He came out 30 seconds later. He looked at Devon. He looked at Janice. He understood the shape of the situation immediately. Devon, come in. He took her into the conference room and closed the door. Janice went back to her computer. She could not hear what was said. She did not try to hear. She put her earbuds in and worked. The conversation lasted 22 minutes. When Devon came out, her face was unreadable in the way faces go unreadable when the expression underneath is too large to let into the air. She crossed the office without looking at Janice's desk. Then she stopped. She turned. How long have you worked here? Janice took one earbud out. About 4 months. Devon nodded. A small nod. She was looking at Janice the way people look at something they have decided is a problem but haven't yet decided how to solve. He work hard, Devon said. Not as information. As a kind of warning. I know, Janice said. Don't take advantage of that. The room was very quiet. Janice looked at Devon steadily. She did not look away. She did not argue. She said, with a quiet that was not deference. I work for him. I'm not in his way, and I'm not in his pocket. You can worry about something else. Devon looked at her for another moment. Then she left. MARSHAWN came out of the conference room. He looked at Janice. She had put her earbud back in and was typing. He stood there for a moment. Then he said, whatever she said. I'm sorry. She took the earbud out again. She didn't say anything I can't handle. He looked at her. That's not the point, he said. She met his eyes. I know, she said softly. Thank you. He went back to his office. He closed the door. He stood at the window looking at the street below for a while, where the city moved on, indifferent, mechanical, relentless. Then he sat down and called his mother and said, in a voice she had not heard him use before, Devon came to my office today. I need you to understand this. My workspace is not available for family interventions. The next time I say that, I won't say it again. There was a long silence. I don't know what's gotten into you, his mother said. I do, he said. And then he did something he had not done in 34 years of conversations with his mother. He ended the call first. Part 6. The distance between knowing and saying. The hardest thing isn't falling. It's standing still inside the fall and trying to pretend you haven't moved. Hood eloquence. Chapter 11. What she knew. Janice Lee was not naive. She had grown up with a mother who said, know what you know. Don't pretend you don't know it. This had served her well in most areas of her life and was serving her now as a kind of burden. She knew what she knew. She knew the way he looked at her when she said something that surprised him. Not the professional acknowledgement, but the one that got in before the professional acknowledgement, the raw flash of it that was there and then carefully managed. She knew the way the office felt when he was in it versus when he was on site. She knew the way she listened for his truck in the parking lot without examining why she was listening. She knew the way the 4-hour drive to Austin had felt like 4 hours going somewhere rather than 4 hours in a vehicle, which was a distinction she had not expected. She knew that when she grabbed his arm in New Orleans and he said, "Don't be," those two words, "don't be," addressed to an apology which meant, "I did not want you to let go." She had lain awake for 2 hours afterward parsing them. She knew all of this. She did not say any of it. She did not say it because she was 23 and he was 34 and she was his employee and he was her employer and there was a contract in play that represented the biggest growth of this company's history and she was not going to complicate any of that with something she could not take back. She did not say it because she had worked too hard for this job and this opportunity. She had applied to 43 companies. She had found the one that felt like going somewhere. She was not going to risk it on a feeling. She did not say it because every time she got close to the edge of it she thought about Devon's face in the office. Don't take advantage of that. And the implication made her angry in a way she could not fully assign. She was not taking advantage of anything. She was doing her job. But what was the line? Where was it exactly? And who got to draw it? She did not say it because he had not said it. And she understood, intuitively and without being told, that MARSHAWN BRENTLY was a man who would not say a thing until he was sure of it. Not because he was slow but because he had been carrying things for so long that he had learned to hold them close and examine them thoroughly before he let them exist in the world. She was doing the same. They were both standing on the same edge, looking at the same water, and neither of them had moved. Chapter 12. What he knew. MARSHAWN BRENTLY was a man who had given everything he had to everyone around him for 34 years and had built, in the process, an absolute fluency in other people's needs and a near-complete illiteracy in his own. He knew what he knew. He knew that the office was different with her in it. Not decorated, different. The kind of different that was about a presence, about the quality of the air when someone inhabits a space with intention. He had not known, before her, that a workspace could feel like that. He had thought workspaces were just places where you did the work. He knew that when she laughed, the real laugh, not the professional one, he stopped whatever he was doing. Not obviously. Not in a way that would have been visible to anyone watching. But internally he stopped, as if his attention had been claimed by something it could not look away from. He knew that on 5 business trips he had thought about her professional value and her contribution and her strategic insight and had also, underneath all of that, thought about the green dress in New Orleans and the way she had held his arm in the street and the 18 inches of elevator silence. He knew he was watching her more than he should. Not intrusively. Not in any way that would have made her uncomfortable. But he was tracking her in the way you track something you are trying to understand. Noticing the way she held her pen when she was thinking, the way she moved around the office with a quiet confidence that was entirely natural and entirely her own, the way she talked to contractors and clients on the phone with the same voice she used with him, the same steady directness that did not shift based on who was listening. She was the same person in every room. He had not met many people like that. He knew he wanted to say something. He had known for 6 weeks. He was holding it the way he held everything, close, examined, not yet released, because he understood that when he said it, if he said it, it would change the landscape of something he had built carefully and valued genuinely. And because, underneath the professional consideration, there was something older and less articulable. He was a man who had never, not once, put himself first. Not romantically, not personally. He had been needed before he had known what he needed. He had given before he had known what it felt like to receive. Wanting something specifically for himself, wanting her specifically for himself, felt like learning a new language in a country where he had only ever spoken the old one. He was learning. He was just learning slowly. The conversation that moved things happened on a Thursday in January. They had been back from New Orleans for 6 weeks. The infrastructure contract had been formally awarded. The office was full of the particular productive energy of a company that has just gotten bigger than it was yesterday. He came in from a site visit at 4 in the afternoon. She was still at her desk. Most days she was gone by 5, but she had been staying later over the past 2 weeks, running numbers on the new contract staffing projections. He put his hard hat on the shelf inside the door and poured himself a glass of water from the filtered pitcher on the small credenza she had added to the office in month 2. He stood at the window and looked at the street. "You should go home," he said, not turning around. "Almost done," she said. He was quiet. Then, "You've been staying late a lot. There's a lot to do." "Janice." She looked up from her screen. He had turned from the window and was looking at her. "Go home," he said. She looked at him. The late afternoon light came through the south windows and fell across his face and the brick wall behind him. "Are you worried about me?" The question arrived simply, without coyness. She was looking at him with the same directness she brought to everything. He said, "Yes." One word. No qualification. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's new." He did not look away. "It's not new," he said. The room held that sentence. The city moved outside the windows. The plant in the corner was green and quiet. The 4 matching chairs sat around the conference table. Janice closed her laptop. She stood up. She put on her coat. She picked up her bag. She crossed the office toward the door. She passed him. Not far from him, the office was not large, and she paused. She looked at him from 2 feet away. I know, she said quietly. I know it's not new. She went to the door. She opened it. She left. He stood at the window until he heard the elevator. Then he stood there a while longer, holding the word no in his chest like something that had finally found its right home. Part 7. What a man builds when he finally builds for himself. She didn't save him. He was already saved. She just showed him where he'd been standing the whole time. Hood eloquence. Chapter 13. The dinner. He asked her to dinner on a Friday. Not a work dinner. Not a let's debrief over food dinner. He stood at her desk at 3 in the afternoon and said, I'd like to take you to dinner. Tonight, if you're free. She looked at him. Not as your employee? The question was honest, not provocative. She needed to know what they were doing. Not as my employee, he said. She picked up her phone and looked at the screen for a moment. Not because there was anything on it to look at, but because she needed somewhere to put her eyes while she gathered herself. Then she put it down. I'm free, she said. He took her to a restaurant he had been to twice before, alone, and had thought about her both times without naming the thought. It was the kind of restaurant the city hid in plain sight. Small, unhurried, the kind where the lighting was designed by someone who understood that the most important conversations required a certain quality of dark. They sat across from each other and there was no portfolio between them, no credential package, no agenda. Just them. It was different from Austin, from New Orleans. Those dinners had been real, but they had carried the permission of context. We are here for work, we are eating because we need to eat. This dinner had no such permission structure. This dinner was what it was. A man who had spent 34 years taking care of everything else sitting across from a woman who had held his arm in a New Orleans street and said his first name without planning to, and both of them finally in the same room without a professional frame around them. He told her about his grandfather again. But differently this time, not the story he had told on the drive to Austin, which was the version you tell when you are explaining yourself to someone, but the version underneath that, the one that had the grief in it. The way he had sat at William Brently's hospital bed and held his hand and understood, at 22 years old, that he was holding the only man who had ever made him feel like enough as he was, and that the man was leaving. She listened. She did not manage the silence that followed. She let it be what it was. She told him about the 43 applications differently too, not as context this time, as confession. That there had been a period, a 3-week period in September before she found the job, when she had lain in her aunt's guest room and felt for the first time in her life that she had done everything right and it had not been enough. That the particular loneliness of being young and qualified and invisible was something she had not been prepared for and did not know what to do with. He listened. He did not rush past it or fix it. He said, that sounds like a hard 3 weeks. It was. I'm glad it ended. She looked at him across the table. Me too, she said. And the way she said it held more than one meaning. After dinner he walked her to her car. The city was cold and clear and the downtown lights were reflected in the wet street. At her car they stood facing each other and he looked at her with the expression she had been cataloging for months. The one that was behind the professional one, the one he did not fully deploy until now, and she thought, here, this is the moment. He reached out and touched her face. Just the back of 2 fingers along her cheek. Just that. Careful and deliberate and warm. She did not move. She let it happen. She let herself be touched. He said, I want to be careful with this. So do I, she said. That's the first thing we've ever agreed on without talking about it for an hour first. She laughed. Not the professional laugh. The real one. He smiled. The full smile, not the managed corner of mouth. The one she had been trying to earn since October. He kissed her. Softly, briefly, with the restraint of a man who has learned to hold things and is choosing, consciously, to set this one down carefully rather than release it all at once. His hand moved from her face to the side of her jaw and she leaned into it, and the kiss was short but there was nothing small about it. It was the weight of 6 months of proximity and knowing and not saying, compressed into something that lasted less than 30 seconds and reorganized everything. When he pulled back he looked at her. Janice, he said. Just her name. I know, she said again. The same 2 words. They meant everything she had not said and everything she had waited to say and everything she intended to say going forward. She got in her car. He stood in the street until her taillights were gone. Then he walked back to his truck, put his hands on the steering wheel, and sat there in the cold and the quiet and the city's distant hum. He was not tired. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he was not tired at all. Chapter 14. The morning after and the morning after that. She came in on Monday and sat at her desk and turned on her computer and said good morning the way she always did, warm, direct, with that particular quality of attention she brought to every start of the day. And he said good morning from his office and came out for coffee from the small machine on the credenza and stood at the doorway of his office and looked at her for a moment. She looked up. They looked at each other. Good weekend? He asked. Very good, she said. He nodded. He went back to his office. He was smiling at his desk before he sat down. They were professional. They remained professional. This was not performance, it was a shared understanding of what this space was and what it required, and neither of them had to negotiate it because they were two people who understood implicitly what they owed each other and what they owed the work. What changed was smaller and larger than conduct. It was the quality of the attention. The way he noticed when she was tired, not just as professional observation but as personal concern. The way she noticed when he had gotten off a difficult call with the permit office and brought him coffee without being asked, set it on his desk and went back to hers without making it into anything. The way the office that had always felt like a place where work happened began to feel, incrementally, like a place where something else was happening too. Not loudly, not in competition with the work, but underneath it and around it, the way foundations relate to buildings. He took her to dinner twice more in January. Lunch once in February. He learned she could not watch horror movies but pretended she could and then grabbed his arm in parking lots after, which he found so specific and so her that he had to look away to manage the size of what it made him feel. She learned he cooked, actually cooked, with technique and patience in a kitchen he had equipped carefully even when there was no one to cook for, and one Saturday evening she came to his house for the first time and he made a meal that took 2 hours and she sat on the counter and talked to him while he did it, close enough to hand him things, and the domesticity of it was so easy it startled both of them. They were careful. They were slow. They were two people who had been waiting for something without knowing they were waiting, finally allowing themselves to acknowledge the wait was over. Chapter 15. The night she stayed. It was a Saturday in late February. The city had gotten cold again after a February thaw. She had come for dinner and dinner had become the evening and the evening had become late and they were on his couch in the living room with the television on but neither of them watching it, and she was beside him with her feet tucked up and his arm around her shoulder and she could feel him breathing. She had been here 3 times now. This felt different from those times, not more significant, exactly, but quieter. More arrived. Like two people who have been walking toward the same place from different directions finally reaching the same ground. He kissed the top of her head. She stilled. He said nothing. He just did it again, slightly, his chin resting on her hair. She turned. She looked up at him. He was already looking at her. What happened between them that night happened the way everything between them had happened, carefully, with full attention, with the weight of everything they knew about each other present in the room. He cupped her face with both hands and kissed her the way he had been holding back from kissing her since January. Unhurried, thorough, with a tenderness that undid her more completely than urgency would have. She moved closer and he let her and then he pulled back far enough to look at her. "Stay," he said. Not a command. Not a question exactly. Something in between, an offering extended with the full awareness of what it meant. She looked at him. She looked at his face. The face she had been reading for 6 months. Every expression, the professional and the unguarded, the managed and the real. She said, yes. What happened between them was private and complete in the way that things are when they have been a long time coming and both people have brought themselves fully to the moment. He was as careful with her as he was with everything he built. Attentive, thorough, present in a way that had nothing to do with the learned performance of attention and everything to do with the genuine disposition of a man who was, finally, building something for himself. She gave him everything she had to give with a directness that was entirely her own. Her hands at his face. His name in the room. The two of them finding the ease that had been accumulating in the space between them for half a year. Afterward she lay with her head on his chest and listened to his heartbeat, and he had one hand at her back and the other at rest beside them, and the room was dark and the city was outside and neither of them said anything for a long time. Then he said, I have been waiting a long time to build something that was mine. She understood he was not talking about the company. She turned her face into his chest. You built it, she said. You just didn't know it yet. He tightened his arm around her. Outside, the city moved. The streets were the streets. The buildings were the buildings. The cold was the cold. Inside, something settled that had been unsettled for 34 years. Part 8. What was built? A man who finally puts something down and says, this one is mine. There is no lonelier courage and no braver freedom. Hood eloquence. Chapter 16. The conversation he had with his mother. He went to his mother's house on a Sunday in March. He sat at the kitchen table in the kitchen he had grown up in and he told her. He told her simply. Janice was not his employee anymore. She was in his life. She was not going anywhere. The company did not need to be a concern. They had handled it with professionalism and would continue to. If his family could not accept this, he would love them at a greater distance. But he would not be in the business of managing their comfort at the expense of his own life. His mother looked at him across the table. She looked at him for a long time. He held her gaze. You sound like your grandfather, she said finally. He said, good. She looked at her tea. She was quiet for a while. Then, not looking at him, is she good to you? He thought about the coffee on his desk. The credential package. The website that made something he had been living inside for 11 years feel like something worth being proud of. The drive to Austin. The second line parade. The way she said his name. He said, yes, Ma. She's good to me. His mother was quiet a moment longer. Then she said, bring her to Sunday dinner. It was not an apology. It was not an enthusiastic welcome. It was Loretta Brently doing what she had always done, going forward because stopping was not in her character, but this time in a direction he had chosen. He said, "I'll ask her." He drove home. He called Janice from the driveway. "My mother wants you to come to Sunday dinner," he said. Pause. "Is that an invitation or a summons?" "It's an invitation with some residual tension in it." She laughed. "The real one." "I'll be there," she said. Chapter 17. What the company became. By April, Brently Construction had a full administrative office, a communications director who was also the owner's partner, a government contract worth 3 times the previous largest contract in the company's history, and a reputation in the city that had shifted from strong to exceptional. The website had been featured in a trade publication. The infrastructure project had been cited as a model of small business government contracting by the State Procurement Office. A journalist named Williams from the city's business journal had done a profile that described MARSHAWN BRENTLY as the kind of builder the city used to make and doesn't make enough of anymore. He read the profile twice. Then he put the magazine on Janice's desk with a sticky that said, "You did this." She put the sticky in her desk drawer and kept it there. She had been promoted. The title on her business card now read, Director of Communications and Operations, Brently Construction LLC. The salary had moved accordingly. She had hired a part-time office coordinator, a young woman named Stephanie, fresh out of a community college administrative program, and was training her with the same patience and directness she brought to everything. MARSHAWN had watched her train Stephanie one afternoon from his office doorway and thought, this is what it looks like when someone who has been prepared finally has somewhere to put it. He thought a lot of things about her that he did not keep to himself anymore. He was learning to say them. Not quickly, he was not a quick man in the ways that mattered, but steadily. He had told her she was good for him. He had told her he had not known, before her, that he could look forward to Monday mornings. He had told her, on a night in April when the windows were open and the city was finally warm again, that she was the first thing in his life that felt entirely like a choice he made for himself. She had held his face in her hands when he said that. She had looked at him with that directness she brought to everything. "Then keep choosing," she said. Chapter 18. What remains. Sunday dinner at Loretta Brently's house was not easy and was not a disaster. It was what things are when they are beginning. Tentative, effortful, with Grace arriving intermittently rather than consistently. Devon was there. She was watchful. She was not warm. At the end of the evening, when Janice was helping clear the table, she had offered before being asked, which Loretta noted. Devon came into the kitchen and stood with her arms folded and said, "He smiled twice at dinner." Janice looked at her. "My brother. He smiled twice at dinner. I don't know the last time that happened." She was not conceding. She was not declaring a truce. She was stating a fact with a tone that acknowledged the fact carried weight. Janice said, "He works hard. He deserves something back." Devon looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," she said, "just that." Then she picked up a dish and washed it. It was not everything, but it was something. On a Tuesday in May, the 1-year anniversary of the job posting he had written at midnight, MARSHAWN came into the office and put a small box on Janice's desk before she arrived. She came in at 8:30. She saw the box. She looked at him through the window of his office. He was at his desk, pretending to read a document. She opened it. Inside was a key. Not a key to anything symbolic, a key to the office, a second copy, the kind of key that said, "You belong here, this is also yours. I am not going anywhere and neither are you." And a card, handwritten, in his block letter contractor's hand. "You walked in here with that orange jacket and changed everything. I just thought you should have a key to it. M." She read it 3 times. Then she looked up. He had put the document down. He was watching her. She held up the key. He nodded. She came to his office doorway. She leaned on the frame. The morning light came through the south windows and the plant was green in the corner and the matching chairs were around the table and the city was outside, moving the way cities move, relentless, indifferent, full of people building things. "MARSHAWN," she said. "Janice," he said. "Thank you," he said. "Don't be." The same 2 words. The New Orleans words. And she understood them the same way she had understood them then. "I did not want you to let go." She crossed the office. She sat in the chair across from his desk, the first chair in the first office, the chair from the interview, and she put the key on the desk between them. He looked at it. He looked at her. Outside, the city was going somewhere. And so were they. Epilogue. 1 year later. The Meridian Commons project completed ahead of schedule. The infrastructure contract was renewed and expanded. Brently Construction now employed 63 people, including a full administrative staff, 3 project managers, and a director of communications and operations whose business card was printed on paper the exact color of a burnt orange suit jacket, MARSHAWN's idea, which she had received with the Real laugh and then made happen. The office on Commerce Street had been expanded into the suite next door. The brick wall was still there. The plant had been joined by 3 others. There was new art, one piece she had chosen. One piece he had chosen without telling her, and which had appeared on the wall one Monday morning, and which she had looked at for a long time before she looked at him and said, "You picked that yourself." And he had said, "I'm learning." Devon had come back to the office. Twice, invited. She had acknowledged the chairs. She had spoken to Janice in a register that was not warm but was no longer watchful. Something that fell somewhere between neutral and the beginning of possibility. Loretta Brently asked about Janice by name on their weekly calls now. She did not ask often. She asked enough. Aunt Jo had met her at a family gathering in the fall and had pulled MARSHAWN aside afterward and said, in the way that only Jo spoke, plainly, without preamble, "That girl sees you. Don't waste it." He had not. On a Friday evening in spring, the windows open, the city warm and loud and full of itself, they were both still in the office at 6 o'clock. Not because there was an emergency. Not because there was a deadline. Just because they were both there and neither had left, and the office had become, over the past year, one of the places they were most completely themselves. She was at her desk. He was leaning in his office doorway with his coffee, decaf now at her suggestion, which he had resisted and then adopted without comment. And he was looking at her the way he looked at her, which was the way a man looks at something he spent a long time without and does not take for granted. "You ready?" he asked. They had dinner plans. She looked up from her screen. She looked at him. She reached over and closed her laptop. "I've been ready," she said. He got his jacket. She got her bag. He held the door. She walked through it. The elevator came. They got in together. The doors closed. Same elevator. Different floor. Same destination. The end. Hood eloquence. Where the streets meet the literature. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.